Hey everyone, welcome back to homerecordingmadeeasy.com and here on my YouTube channel. And once again, welcome to the beginner's guide to setting up a mix in Presonus Studio One version 3. These videos are intended to help the absolute beginner, whether you are new to Studio One or whether you're coming over from another DAW or whether this is the first time you've ever recorded in any digital audio workstation. These series of videos are intended to help you get up and running very quickly, to show you the basic fundamentals with no fuss and no muss so you can make better music in your home studio. This week we're going to be taking a look at the static mix, or a rough mix, or a first mix as some people like to call it. So before we do that, if you'd be so kind, if you like what you see in this video, please hit that subscribe button. Also, head over to the Facebook page, facebook.com/homerecordingmadeeasy, and follow me over there as I'm constantly posting content that's not part of the YouTube channel. And if you want more tips, tricks, concepts, and training around all aspects of home recording, mixing, and mastering, be sure to head out to homerecordingmadeeasy.com for all your training needs. So let's head on over to the Presonus Studio One. As we see, we're on our start page, and we are going to head over to our song that we've been working on by clicking on the button in the top right-hand corner called Song. And that is going to bring us to this screen here. So if you have not seen all the videos up to this point, go out to the YouTube channel and search for the playlist Beginner's Guide or Studio One Beginner's Guide. And there's about 20 some odd videos as of the recording of this video, which has all the videos prior to this one here, showing you how to get set up and how to get to this point that you see on the screen in front of you here. So once we've gotten to the point where everything is organized, color-coded, we've cleaned our tracks, and we're ready to start mixing, the very first thing I like to do before we add a single plugin to any one of our sessions, because everyone really wants to just jump right in and start adding plugins, what I'm going to urge you to do is not to jump right in and start adding plugins. The very first thing I like to do is I like to do what's called a static mix. Or some people will call it a rough mix, or some people will call it the first mix. And basically what a static mix is, or a rough mix is a way where we don't add any plugins. We take a listen now to our song, and we get the balances and the panning the best we can before we do any processing. And you may say, why would you want to do that? Well, the reason why I like to do it, and there's several reasons, but the main reason why I would urge you to do this, especially if you're kind of new to mixing, is that you want to make sure that as you go down the road of mixing, you start adding EQ and compressions and delays and reverbs and all these different things that we're going to talk about in future videos. You always want to make sure that what you're doing to your mix as far as processing goes is actually helping the overall song. It's a real tempting thing when you're working in a computer recording, you have access to all these different plugins to just start slapping different processors and plugins and compressors and EQs, and before you know it, what ends up happening is you end up taking something that should be done so simply, and you end up making a mess from a tonal and from an EQ and a compression standpoint out of the song. And that's very, very typical with a lot of beginners, and believe me, I did the same thing, so don't feel bad about it. And so what the static mix is going to do, it's going to allow us to be able to reference back to where we first started. Okay, even though it's not a final mix and it doesn't sound completely polished, we want to always have that first static reference mix. So during the course of our mixing process, we can always kind of check back and see, is what we're doing to the mix as we're moving down the road, is it helping the song? Is it hurting the song? It kind of gives you get your ears back to a reference point to kind of recalibrate yourself, if you will, because you will find that as you're moving down the road and you start playing with all these different things, that it's really, really easy to kind of stray off the road. And before you know it, you got a mess on your hands. So that's what I like to do first. So what I'm going to do here is we're going to do a quick static mix. Again, this is a small session with some drums, bass, couple of 4 guitar tracks, and some vocal tracks. Now, as a disclaimer, I'm going to go ahead, as you can see down here in yellow, our vocal tracks, and you can see the faders are all the way down. I'm going to keep the vocals out of the static mix for copyright reasons, because I really don't have permission to really be posting this thing all over the internet, and I don't want to have any copyright issues. So you're not going to hear the vocals as part of this statics mix. I'm going to do the drums, bass, and the guitars, but you get the idea of what we're going to do. So first thing I'm going to do is I'm just going to highlight all my tracks. I'm going to highlight the kick drum, and I'm going to hold down my shift key, and I'm going to come all the way over to the electric guitar, and I'm going to highlight all the tracks, and I'm just going to turn them all the way down, okay? And we're going to start with the drums. So I'm going to just loop a section of music here where most of the band is playing, right around this section here. And I'm going to just loop this section of music, and I'm going to start bringing up the faders one at a time, and I'm just going to try to balance the overall mix as best I can, okay? So let's just go ahead and do that. So let's play this back. Let me turn up some volume here so you guys can hear. Here we go. So right now we don't hear anything. And we're going to start turning up some faders. So I urge you to turn up your monitors if this is kind of hard to hear. I want to make sure I don't blast you guys out. So I like to just balance, get my overheads and my kick and my snare kind of going here. Get kind of my pocket happening. Okay, we got some tom hits in there, so I'm going to bring up some tom mics as well. And now on the toms, we're going to do a little bit of panning here. We have 4 tom tracks here. We have tom 1, 2, 3, and 4. So I'm going to pan my tom 1 a little over to say maybe 30%. I'm going to keep tom 2 a little bit more up the middle. Tom 3, I'm going to pan over to the right about 30%. And this is all just temporary. And tom 4 is going to be kind of a floor tom. So I'm going to pan that over about 70% to the right. Somewhere around there, 70, 71. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to zoom in here. I'm going to come over to where there's kind of a tom fill towards the end here. Just going to kind of loop this section so I can hear those toms. Yeah, we're going to bring some bass guitar in here. A little bit larger section. And we're bringing in some acoustic guitars. Now I have 2 acoustics. So I'm going to kind of pan these hard left and right for now. Okay, so we're just kind of going through, we're just doing some preliminary panning, some preliminary volumes, just to kind of get things to kind of sit. Now, I may do this actually, you know, I just don't whip through this. I mean, I'm doing this quickly for demonstration purposes, but during the course of a real project, I might spend a good hour and a half just doing a static mix, taking breaks every 15 or 20 minutes, maybe going to get a cup of coffee or something, get my ears to take a break, and then come back and then listen a little bit more. And it's really critical. And the reason, again, because you also, like I said, you're going to be able to reference, we're going to export this. I'm going to show you that towards the end here, and we'll be able to use this as a reference, our static mix. But also, too, what it's going to do is when we get a good static mix, now when we start to do some EQ and compression, we kind of have a lot of our levels and our panning kind of in a place. It puts our mix at a very good starting point. So it makes the processing of EQ and compression a little bit easier as well, because you already got a mix that kind of sounds pretty good. Okay, even though, you know, tonally it's not where we want it to be, and not everything can be heard real clearly, and it's not everything can be heard properly in the mix yet, but we haven't done any processing. We're just trying to get a balance here. So I bring up my electric guitars as well. And I'm not going to pan those hard left and right. I'm going to go maybe 50% over for now, just because we already have the acoustics. It's kind of like this. Just see what we got. So on this right guitar, we have a little bit of a lead line. Okay, we're not going to do anything with vocals, as I said earlier. Loop it back over again. Now this mix here sounds obviously really dark right now because there's a lot of low, mid-low buildup here. Now one thing that you can do, and again, it's really kind of personal preference here, if you're getting in a mix like this where it's like, look, I don't want to start putting a bunch of plugins on, I'm just looking for a balance, but it's got a lot of low and mid-low buildup. What you can do on your master bus over here is we can just add a simple EQ, and we can do something like this to kind of just make it sweeten it up just a little bit, just for our rough mix. So let's go over to the Presonus folder here, and let's pick up just the Pro EQ. Let me see, where is it here? It's going to be here. Okay, and we could just throw this on our master bus. And then what we can do from here is we could just do a little bit of EQ shaping just to get it to sound a little bit nicer, and then we can always leave this, or we can remove it when we start our mixing process. But let me show you what I mean. Here, all that low ends right here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to pick a point here. It's about 350 hertz. I'm going to narrow this Q a little bit, and I'm going to go ahead. I'm just going to sweep a good EQ technique called sweeping, where we're going to go ahead and we're going to kind of find those offending real low mid buildup. Right in this area here. Where it gets really hollow sounding. We'll just dial some of that out a little bit like this. Hear how much that cleans up the mix? I take it away. So it makes a big difference, just taking out about 4 dB at about 171 hertz, although the real big acoustic guitar buildup, just kind of dialing that out a little bit. Okay, just to do something like that. Again, you don't have to do that, but that's something you can do to kind of make the mix sound a little bit nicer, the static up front. Just take out a little bit of that low mid there. Okay, so now you can see everything is being routed down to my busing system down here on the end. And then if you take a look at the output meter here, now that we set the output, the master fader to 0 dB, it's at unity. All our buses are at unity. And you'll see that we're probably running somewhere around the negative 12 dB, which is a good starting point when we're going to start our mix. So not only are we doing a static mix here, we're kind of gain staging. And what gain staging is it allows us at the very beginning of the mix to go ahead and get all of our individual tracks and our overall mix at a nice conservative level from a volume point of view. I like to start at around a negative 12 dB. That gives me plenty of what we call headroom between negative 12 dB and 0 dB, all that 12 dB of headroom, because when we start adding EQ and compression, we're going to inadvertently, we're going to bring up the volume of the whole mix. And at the end of the mix, we want to end up somewhere around a negative 6 dB. And that gives the mastering engineer, or if you're the mastering engineer, plenty of headroom to add the final touches of EQ, compression, and limiting on the mix. So at the end of the mix, final mix is going to be somewhere around a negative 1 dB, maybe a negative half of a dB at its peak. That's about where you want to be for a good healthy master. Okay, so my static mix, as I'm going through this, I'm constantly watching the master fader to make sure that we're not really exceeding a negative 10 to negative 12 dB. Okay, if we are, then that means our individual tracks need to be brought down, or our buses need to be brought down. So once I get a nice balance between all the different instruments, I take a look at my master fader, which we'll do right here. So around a negative 9, almost negative 10. Let it loop around again. And you want to do this during the heaviest section of the song, usually the choruses, which is what we're doing at the beginning of this loop. Here's a chorus. So you can see we're around negative 12, negative 13. It's a good starting point. Negative 10, it's actually perfect. Negative 9, negative 14. Okay, so you get the idea. Between negative 10 and negative 12 is where you kind of want to be at its peaks during the largest part of the song, which is typically the chorus, okay, in most tracks. So that's kind of where we want to be. Now, let's say that was running at around a negative 5 or negative 4. Let's say it was too loud. Then what I would do, if I was happy with the balance of this instruments and I was happy with the static mix, I would just highlight all the tracks, whoops, and I would just turn them all down a few dB, because now the relationship between all the different tracks from a volume perspective is the same. Or I would raise them if they weren't loud enough. If we were well below -12, like -15, -18, I would turn these up a little bit. So we were somewhere in that -10 to -12 dB. Make sense? So not only are we doing a static mix to kind of get a reference track for us to kind of refer back to, but we're also gain staging the project, which is super, super important. Now, the mistake that a lot of beginners make is when they get this thing running at around a -12 dB, they feel like they can't hear it enough. It's not loud enough, so they turn up all the faders. Okay? Take a step back. Don't do that. Turn up the master volume on your audio interface if you need more volume coming out of your speakers or into your headphones. Okay, don't turn up the faders. Get the faders and get it set around a -10, -12, and use your master volume control on your interface to give yourself some more volume. Although I would recommend when you start mixing that you mix at lower volumes, and we'll talk about that in a later video to why that's a good idea. But anyway, so now we've kind of done two things here. We've not only gain staged the project, right? We've also got ourselves a static mix. So let's say we're happy with the static mix. So again, let's take a listen and take a look at the master fader meter. I've turned these up a little bit and see where we are. And we're pretty good. We're in pretty good shape. -12. Okay, so that's pretty good. So if we're happy with that, and let's say we are, let's do a command save. Let's always save. Now what we want to do is we want to bounce this or mix this out. I want to make an MP3 or a WAV file of this, because we're going to now use that MP3 and WAV file as our reference track. So now if you're using, so first of all, we want to make sure we have our start and our end markers or flags at the beginning and the end of the song, like we talked about in the last video. And the reason for that is this is going to be the range of where we're going to mix from starting point to ending point. So we're going to put the start flag at the beginning. We're going to put the end flag towards the end. Okay, this is a long song, about 7 minutes long. Okay, and now we're going to go to song, and we're going to go to export mixdown. Okay, make sure that nothing is muted, everything is, and nothing soloed, everything is playing. Now again, we're not using the vocal tracks in this song, as I said earlier, so just disregard that. And we're just going to go to export mixdown. Now we're going to get this export mixdown dialog box, and again, there's a whole video on this in the beginners series playlist if you want to check this out. Now again, depending on the version of Studio One that you're using, if you're using Studio One Professional, you're going to have the option under format to use MP3 files along with these other types. If you're using Studio One Prime or Studio One Artist or Studio One Producer, you're only going to have you're not going to have the MP3 file option. That's for the Pro version only, unless you purchase the there's an add-on pack, I think, if you have Artist, to where you can use MP3 files. Either way, doesn't matter. MP3 or WAV doesn't make a difference. I'm going to use MP3 because it's a smaller file and it's easier to deal with. So what we're going to do is we're going to pick where do we want the location to go. For now, I'm just going to click on this, and I'm going to put it in our test song folder that we set up earlier on in the series. The file name, I'm going to call the name of the song. This is going to be test song, and I'm going to go static mix. Okay, that's what this is. It's an MP3 file. I'm going to use, fairly high bitrate, high quality. Now the export range, we want to be between the song start and end marker, because remember we set our start flag and our end flag, okay? And then everything else can be just left at its default, and we're going to say go ahead and export this, and you're going to see it's going to export this MP3. If it's a WAV file, it's going to take even longer, but go ahead and export this. And then what we're going to do is we're going to bring that file now back into Studio One, and I'm going to show you a couple of different ways you can use this as a reference track, which is really cool. And then we're going to end this video. So this will just take 1 second here, or a couple of seconds. Alrighty then, so then here's our song. So let's close this for a second. Okay, so now there's a couple of different ways that you can do this. One way to do this without having to use any additional plugins is we can just take that song now, click our browser. If we go under Files, we're going to go look for that. Song, that file, which is on my desktop, I believe, if I remember right. And I think it's under, let's see, Beginner's Guide to Mixing. It's under test song, I believe. Here it is, static mix, test song MP3. Here's our static mix that we just made. So navigate to wherever you put your static mix, and we're going to take it, we're just going to left click it, we're going to drag it onto the edit screen, and it's going to make another audio track for us. This is one way to do it. Let's go ahead and let's change the color so it stands out. Let's make it this dark purple here, okay? Now this is our static mix. So what we can do is we can solo this up at any time during the course of our mix, and if we listen back, and here it is. Or you can just turn down the fader so you don't have to keep soloing it. You play the rest of your mix. Okay, and if you want to reference it, you can just, well, the best way to do it is probably just to solo it, turn it up and solo it. And now you can bounce back and forth between your mix as you're adding EQ and compression, and you can compare it to your static mix. It's always a good idea to do this to kind of recalibrate your ears and make sure, are we moving in the right direction from a mixing perspective? This is one way to do it. This is the quickest and easiest way to do it. However, I'm going to show you another way to do it if you want to do something a little bit more streamlined as far as workflow goes. So I'm going to just highlight this and remove this track, okay? If you wish to do this, another thing you can do on your master bus is we can add a plugin that I love to use, and I did a video review of this. It's on my YouTube channel. It is by a company called Sample Magic, I think it's called. Let me find it. It's down here under, where is it? Oh yeah, Sample Magic, okay? It's called Magic AB. Okay, I'm going to show you this plugin. I'm going to take this, I'm going to drag this on my master bus after REQ, the last effect in the insert chain. Okay, and what this is going to do, sometimes Studio One will crash with this, but anyhow, what this is going to do, this is a great plugin to be able to load in a bunch of reference tracks into your session, and then you can refer it using this plugin. So let me quickly show you how this works. So right here we have you could put 9 reference tracks in here at once in this plugin. Okay, to do that, you just here on the first slot, we're going to go click to load, and we're going to put, here it is right here. Okay, and it loaded test song static mix in here. So here is our static mix. Now I'm not going to walk through how you use this entire plugin. You can go check out my YouTube channel, but if I go over here to AB mode, okay, A mode is our mix in Studio One, our session. So if I play this back, okay, now what you're listening to is the actual mix here in Studio One. Okay. If I go over, and you got a highlight here, if I go over to B, this is the track that we loaded into the static mix, that we loaded into the plugin. Here's our static mix. You can see the playhead moving up here. Here's the audio waveform. Okay. You can see it here, B. And if I go back, if you hit the playhead, if I go back to A, here's our mix inside of Studio One. So A is the actual recording session, B is the static mix. And you can see the level meters here. A is on the left, B is on the right. Now what's going to happen, as you're mixing and adding EQ and compression, you're going to find that the A track is going to start to get louder, right? Because we started at negative 12 dB. You're going to end up around a negative 6 dB. So when you're comparing it back and forth to your static mix, you're going to have this big volume jump. So what you want to do is as the A track, the Studio One session, gets louder when you're adding processing, when you go to the B track, the static mix, and it drops off, what you can do is take this little, you could do it 2 ways. You can go here and you can turn it up. See where it says I can add up to, I think, 12 dB of gain to level match what's going on in your Studio One session, or you can do it here on the right side, the output meter. Okay? Then that way, you can level match between what you're doing in Studio One and your static mix, because you don't want to have this big volume jump, because when you have a big volume jump, your ears kind of trick you into believing that it's louder, it's going to be better. So you want to try to constantly be matching the volume between your static mix and your final mix that you're working on in your project. And this is great. You can also use this plugin not only for your static mix, but you can also load in other reference tracks. So let's say this was like, I don't know, this is kind of an R&B kind of a song to begin with. So let's say, I don't know, let's pick any other commercially released R&B track. You can buy it on iTunes, rip it off your CD into an MP3 or WAV format. You can bring it in here, and then you can reference your mix against other professional mixes. And what's great about Sample Magic is you have 9 different tracks you can put in all at the same time, and you can just click at the on and off buttons between them. So you can listen to your mix versus, again, commercially released recordings and your static mix. It kind of gives you a reference to make sure that you're going in the right direction. So I hope this video was helpful. That is static mixes, rough mixes, and how you can also gain stage your project all at the same time, and then use those static mixes to compare them to what you're doing in your session to make sure you're going down the right road. So I hope this video was helpful. Again, for more tips, tricks, concepts, and training around everything home recording, be sure to head out to homerecordingmadeeasy.com. Once again, please subscribe to our YouTube channel if you have not done so already. Go out and check out the Beginner's Guide to Studio One in the playlist on my YouTube channel. There's probably 30 videos at this point of taking you through all the way through this series and how we started at the very beginning all the way up to the video that we just saw today. And also be sure to follow me out on Facebook, facebook.com/homerecordingmadeeasy. And until the next video, this has been David with homerecordingmadeeasy.com, and I appreciate your support, and I'll speak to you all soon. Take care.